football, the red zone is where a team has to make small adjustments to ensure victory. As you approach retirement, you also need to make small adjustments to ensure success. This is the Red Zone Retirement Program with registered investment advisor and enrolled agent John Mears of Mears Money Management.
All right, Coach, we're going to get into it this week and talk about tariffs. We got a new sheriff, and he's talking tariffs, and I know that's cheesy, but I'm going to do it anyway. So we're going to have this conversation this week here on the podcast, and you've got some extra interesting information to share with along the way too. So going to get into some good stuff this week. How you doing?
Doing good. So like I was telling you when I was writing the notes for this, I'm like, tariffs, and just like Jim Mora, playoffs. Tariffs just seem to be on everybody's mind. Everybody's talking about them, good, bad, in between.
Well, they kind of slipped off the radar because of all the Doge is terrible, yes. But so they kind of slipped down the radar a little bit. They'll come back. They'll come back as soon as he starts.
Yeah, but it's definitely a topic that his clients have brought up, so it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. I do see pros and cons to all this,
sure.
And we'll address that in today's podcast. Yeah. So we'll kind of dig into the weeds a little bit, but it's all understandable.
Well, let's get into it. Yeah, let's break it down. I guess just keep it simple. First off, just explain what a tariff is. Just kind of cover the basis, right?
A tariff is a tax. It's a tax on goods coming into your country. So if you are, say, a Chinese exporter and you're sending, clothes or shoes here, you do have to pay a tax, whether that tax be 10%, 15, 20, 25%, whatever it is, you pay the tax. And the United States Treasury, just like the IRS, collects this, and that is just additional revenue. Yep. And we keep it on the books. If you look up where the revenue in the United States comes from, it's not just income tax, corporate taxes. You will see tariffs on there. There is a legitimate line item.
Been there a long time.
Of a method of collecting taxes.
Yep. Not a new thing. George Washington did the first one. So
yes,
yeah.
We like to remind people. I think we all remember this, but the income tax didn't come on until February 25th, which is right about now in 1913. So that was the first income tax. Before that, we really did derive our national revenue through tariffs and collection of fees. That's really how we did.
And we're going to get into that because I want you to break that down a little bit, because obviously, Trump's made some conversations about, eliminating the federal income tax, which, everybody's like, that'd be great. Right. But we got so much, it's so crazy, the stuff that we're seeing back and forth, but there's actually precedent, and some of this stuff could actually work, but you have to change the status quo a little bit, I think, if we're going to make any real, lasting changes. Yeah. But before we get into that real fast, I just want to point out the difference between tariffs and sanctions, right? Because people get all up in arms and say, well, the tariffs are hurting the people of the countries, the blah, 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 blah. Totally different than sanctions. We always try economic sanctions on countries when we want to get them to kind of come to terms and come to deal. That does hurt the entire population. Tariffs don't. It only hurts on the wholesalers, the manufacturers, and if you choose to buy the product, right? So think about the Canadian tariffs right this minute, right? A lot of conversations about that, so it's like, well, I've got Canadian friends saying, hey, I'm not going to be buying, log cabin, maple syrup, if that's made here. I can't remember if that's made in the States, but whichever one, right? A maple syrup that's made here in the States, I want to buy Canadian maple syrup. Well, that's actually a good thing. That's good for your country, right? To buy your domestic products. Same thing here, right? So there's definitely pros and cons to it.
Yeah, and right now, again, as we're recording this, there is a pause on the Canadian and Mexican tariffs. But even if we do enact them, there's a lot that gets into again the weeds of the tariffs. If I can kind of get into that real quickly, the right now we import twice as much as we export. So really, if you're looking at tariffs of that, who's it really going to hurt? Is from just a pure tax standpoint, right? It certainly hurt the other countries more than it'll hurt us. There's also the line of thought that we can't produce anything we want here in the United States, where that's the most efficient way. Go back to your Econ 101 Ricardian theory of trade, where we want to do what we do best and you guys do what you do best.
Oh yeah, I totally remember that Ricardian theory of trade. Yeah, that was I keep that in my mind all the time.
Yes. But one thing that we have to remember is that when it comes to clothing, shoes, stuff like that, tariffs can hurt the American consumer, because that is something that the wholesalers here in the United States will bump up the price if that's what ends up happening. However, one of the things that people forget is that if there is a world market for something, say oil or timber or minerals, those are not dictated by Canada or us. They're dictated by the entire world market. And so Canada, and we'll use oil as an example, Canada does not really have a choice here.
They do heavy crude and little refining.
Yes. So their exports to the United States, they don't really have any other choices because they're very, we'll call it environmentally conscious up there. So they don't have any pipelines to Europe. They have no pipelines to Asia. So really we're their biggest customer. And they are kind of stuck as to what they're able to charge. So they really will have to actually discount their oil.
Probably hence where the pausing came in, right? I mean,
yes.
Like him or dislike him, I think, you've got a non-politician in there saying, hey, we're going to use business tactics to get people to, come to heel, if you will. And we didn't have any wars under his prior presidency. So, yeah, I mean, I think you got to give some of this stuff a bit of a shake, right? To see how it plays out.
Yeah. So there comes the question of the motivation behind the tariffs.
Right.
So when we hear some conflicting stories, we do, but
sure.
He has said verbally, this is what he says, whether we believe Trump or not, but he says he is using the bully pulpit really here to get people to pay attention to their borders more and that sort of thing, and to kind of work with along the U.S. lines of our thinking that we have right now.
Right.
So that's kind of what he's saying, but. Again, if he wants to actually indeed increase manufacturing in the United States, make us more self-sufficient, then there is another side of the tariffs that we have to get to. And that is we have to actually make manufacturing attractive here in the United States.
Isn't that part of it though, John? Right? Because if you're hit with a heavy export to bring something in and the U.S. is your biggest customer base, you're liable to open a plant in here and manufacture. I mean, I think that's the idea, right?
Yes. So in order for that to actually be executed, though, we have to lower taxes and we have to reduce regulation.
Which he's doing, right? That's the corporate tax thing going down to 15%. Right. Okay.
Correct. So without lowering taxes and without reducing regulation, and if manufacturing is not attractive in the United States, again, then tariffs can hurt.
Right.
So tariffs will work. Again, if we want manufacturing in the United States, tariffs can work also if we want, again, the bully pulpit. We want you to kind of go along with our values here in the United States. So we don't know what's happening on either side of those things, but it looks like both are valid reasons. There is a third reason, which we don't have a lot of time to get into on this podcast, but that is Trump has actually brought up the idea of eliminating the income tax.
Yeah.
And that is something that there's an economist I follow named Peter St. Onge. He has studied this and he has pointed out that if we were to get rid of income tax and just kind of focus on the tariffs, we would still be short. And we laugh about this, but we'd be short about $1.5 trillion, which is real money.
Right.
But we'd be short in our revenue projections by $1.5 trillion.
Well, not the way the government spends it. It's not real money. So they can find that in their sleep.
Well, that's one of the points that he was making recently was that they could probably come up with about half of that through efficiency, however you want to define that. Sure. And then half of that would also be, we could make up for it in growth, because if we had no income tax and we had lesser regulation, every entrepreneur throughout the world would want to put their money in the United States.
Very true.
And we have more goods.
Right. And consumers are spending more because they've got more money in their pocket because they're not paying income tax.
Yes. But more goods usually means less inflation. So that's one thing that we would be able to also have. So there's it all kind of ties together.
So it's possible. It's not just a pipe dream. There's actual possible math around that.
Yes, there's possible math, and the guy has actually done this. Again, it's still a high mountain to climb.
Sure, yeah. But
it is possible, and some people think that in the back of Trump's mind, maybe he's thinking about that as well. I don't know. He hasn't really said much about that since the campaign. So,
I know they had their conversation at the time we're taping this about a week ago that with the tax situation with the no tips on tax, the press secretary was talking about that, and the no Social Security for seniors, or the tax on Social Security. So I mean, they're still looking at all these different pieces. And I think when you bring it back to tariffs a little bit, sometimes, the immediate knee jerk, media reaction is, well, let's just point out the bad in everything, right? Because they want to make sure that everything just looks as terrible as possible so that you'll watch them the entire time. But the end user doesn't always necessarily feel the pain of a tariff, right? So we need to be honest
Correct.
about that a little bit too, because you're talking about the manufacturers, the wholesalers, the distributors, and they can also make their bargaining back and forth. If it's let's just say it's a 25%, increase on maple syrup. We'll just kind of use that as the analogy.
Mm-hmm.
By the time it gets to the end user, at the grocery store, it might be a couple of cents, so it may not be that massive.
The same economist that I was referring to, Peter St. Onge, he had done a study with the Trump's first term when he had the tariffs on China, and his studies were that actually 80% of the tariffs did not flow through. Now that still means 20% did, but 80% was.
So explain that, John. Did not flow through to the end user?
Yes.
Okay.
So what the Chinese exporters did is they either reduced their price or just basically ate the cost.
Right.
So they actually had lower profit, or Beijing actually helped subsidize them.
Gotcha.
To keep market share and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So there were external factors where we were not hurt as much, because I don't think many of us really experienced a surge in inflation during that first Trump administration. And
no,
so
not until the COVID spending started, did we not? And that,
correct. It wasn't after
a
lot of government spending.
Yeah.
So there was evidence that the a lot of these exporters will actually eat the cost again. So you're looking at China having their own reasons for eating the cost, and then again you're looking at what we would call world markets with oil, timber, and minerals, where there are also limitations. They can do the retaliation with American agriculture. That's legit and that's real. They can also do again clothes, shoes, cars. That's actually legitimate as well. So we could experience some inflation there, but we also have a decrease in other areas to kind of help offset it. So it may not be as severe.
It may not be, and we are seeing the largest consumer base out there, right? I mean, Americans consume more than anything, right?
Yes.
So it does seem sometimes like you do have just that basic, as a basic business standing, you just kind of go, look, we buy more than anybody. So why don't you just come to us with a fair deal? And we'll make this happen, And
that's something that we was the very original tariff conversation years ago was that we were not a heavy tariff country, so to speak, and our trading partners were. And so me being a Austrian economist, I believe that we should have free markets for everything.
Sure.
But part of that is that they have to play fair as well. It's like,
and they do tariff us, John, right? So don't make no mistake about this for folks who are not clear on that. We've been getting hit with tariffs forever.
Correct.
Yeah. It's not a one-sided street.
That's the point.
Yeah.
The other countries would have tariffs on our manufacturing. We were not having similar or the same tariffs on their, on their manufacturing, their exports. So originally it was just trying to even the field, so to speak.
Yeah.
So again, whether you agree or disagree with that, but that was one of the ideas behind that.
Yeah, makes sense.
But we export. We import twice as much as we export. So
now I don't have the link in front of me, John, but I had it when I had this conversation with somebody last week as well. But if I can find it, I'll put it in the show notes for folks to check out. But it was from a writer who had put the information that, the tariffs that Trump did put in place in his first administration, because some of the conversation was, well, it doesn't really benefit the coffers, right? And it went on to show that I'm paraphrasing here, but I think it was from quarter 2 to quarter 3 of 18 to 19, somewhere in there. But it went from 40 million to 80 million, I think it was 40 billion to 80 billion, right? We're so used to small numbers. It sounds like saying a billion is like, whoa. But that's real numbers, right? I mean, that makes that moves the needle. So, and that was just a small sampling size from quarter 3 to quarter 2 of the next year. So,
right.
To your point about doing more tariffs on other things, fair tariffs, just a little something, but it is a way to kind of raise the coffers and pay off some of this $36 trillion debt we got.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to how the tariffs may affect our clients and our portfolios, a little bit is still we're in the wait and see arena here, because we really don't know what the end game is. Trump may not know what his end game is either. Let's be fair here.
Sure.
But we have to kind of see what the purpose of these tariffs are. So they may be very short-lived with Canada and Mexico, just trying to get them to work with us on, again, the borders and trying to align our values with both countries.
Right.
Both countries are theoretically more liberal than we are, and maybe that's something Trump is trying to get aligned with them, is a little bit more conservative value system. Whether that works or not, but that might be all he's trying to accomplish. We may still have some tariffs, but instead of 25% tariffs, maybe a 10% tariff
Right,
or
they can
nothing,
settle, yeah.
depending on what they want to do. So, but again, if we're trying to use tariffs as a method to increase manufacturing here and reduce taxes and reduce regulation, I think for our portfolios that would be a boon. Now, that may take a while for that actually to happen,
right?
Because the manufacturers here also have to believe that the tariffs are short-lived as well, because or they're permanent. I mean,
right?
Because if they believe they're just short-lived, then they're not going to invest in manufacturing here in the United States.
True.
So they have to believe it's permanent. So there's a lot that we have to kind of still let play out. So anytime you're seeing something on the news, again, turn off the news. They're probably giving you bad advice, but be very, very careful because we don't know yet. We really don't know. So if there's a pundit on the news saying, by the way, it's all bad, or even if they say it's all good, we really don't know right now. Yeah. There is a danger of inflation if we don't do it right. That danger, I don't think is as severe as people make it out to be, but still there.
Sure.
And so we have to keep our eye on that. But there's also the possibility that this could all turn out very well if all the pieces kind of work the way that we're hoping they work out.
John has a couple of free books, Diffuse and Tax-Free Retirement in California, that reveal exactly how you can experience zero taxes in retirement and overcome the IRS lien on your 401k, IRA, and 403b, which could threaten your future lifestyle. These are complimentary, so all you have to do to pick these up 100% free is just stop by RescueMyRetirement.net. That's RescueMyRetirement.net. Fill in the basic info and he'll ship those out to you immediately. That's RescueMyRetirement.net for a copy of Diffuse and Tax-Free Retirement in California.
Yeah, and and if you want to bring that back, and we'll wrap it up with this, bringing that, all the pieces have to work out for things to go swimmingly well. Doesn't mean you can't have success if they don't. And that's the same kind of thing when dealing with your own personal financial situation. You don't want to necessarily be in a situation where everything has to go swimmingly well for you to be successful. You want to have, a good strategy put together so that, when a few lumps come down the pike, because they will, that you're going to be able to weather that. And I think that's the same thing that the government has to get to. Whatever side of the coin you find yourself on, we cannot be the world's bank, and we can't keep, you just physically can't keep operating at a $6 trillion deficit annually.
No.
It's
unsustainable.
It's unsustainable,
yeah.
Right? You can't run your household that way. If every year, even if you brought it down, John, to small numbers and said every year you were $6,000 more in the hole than you were the year before, and you did that for a 20-year period, you've killed your any chance at retirement. You're totally you can't do it, right? So we can't do it as a society, as a people either. So,
yes. Yeah, we build our portfolios to be all-weather portfolios,
exactly,
in good, bad, and the method that we use, where we're going to rebalance on the highs and lows. The unexpected is part of how we build our portfolios. So this is something that you shouldn't have to worry about what's going to happen, because we don't know what's going to happen.
No.
And the whole point to the way we design our portfolios is so that something challenging can happen and we're prepared for that.
Yeah.
Something good can happen, and we can take advantage of that as well. So that's something that we know that our portfolios are designed for this kind of uncertainty, because if you're looking for certainty, you're never going to find it.
No, for sure. And I think that's what we're trying a little bit with the government too. The status quo is not working, so you got to make some changes a little bit. So we'll see how it plays out, and it may work out well. So we'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you got questions about tariffs and how it might affect you, or just in questions in general about how to make sure that your retirement program is going to survive in any economy, because you might be around for the next 30 years in retirement, and there's probably going to be multiple economies along those ways. Mm-hmm. Get yourself onto the calendar, reach out to John. We'll have all the links in the show notes below. We've had stuff popping up throughout the show as well. But just click on one of the links, go to his website, all that good jazz, and get some time onto his calendar. And thanks for hanging out with us here on Red Zone Retirement Program, Simple Investing, Smart Future with John Mears. Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
Advisory services offered through Mears Money Management, Inc., an RIA registered in the states of California and Texas. California Department of Insurance License number 0685203.